It's week 6 of the NFL season, and here are my predictions for the week. But first, how did I do last week in my predictions? In week 5, in wins and losses, I went 6-8. Then with the spreads, I went 8-6. And before getting into it, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. So kicking off the week on Thursday Night Football, we have the 4-1 Eagles versus the 1-4 Giants. The Eagles are coming off their first loss of the season, 21-17 against the Broncos, where Jalen Hurts went 23 of 38, 280 yards and 2 touchdowns, and was sacked 6 times. And Saquon Barkley had just 6 carries for 30 yards, but Devontae Smith had a good game with 8 receptions and 114 yards. Then for the Giants, they're coming off a 26-14 loss against the Saints, where Jackson Dart went 26 of 40, 202 yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, while also running for 55 yards, but did lose a fumble. And Cam Skattebo had 59 yards rushing and 6 receptions for 45 yards. The Eagles have now won 6 out of their last 7 games versus the Giants, but all 5 of their games this season have been within 1 score. So the Eagles haven't been blowing out teams this year. I have the Eagles winning, but I have the Giants covering the 7.5 point spread. Then moving over to Sunday, we have another London game with the 3-2 Broncos versus the 0-5 Jets. In the Broncos win over the Eagles, Bo Nix went 24 of 39, 242 yards and a touchdown. Then J.K. Dobbins had 79 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Cortland Sutton had 8 receptions and 99 yards. And on the defensive side, Nick Bonito had 2.5 sacks, and he now leads the NFL with 7. Then for the Jets, they're coming off a 37-22 loss against the Cowboys, and Justin Fields went 32 of 46, 283 yards and 2 touchdowns. Breece Hall had 113 yards rushing and 4 receptions for 42 yards, and Garrett Wilson led them in receiving with 6 receptions, 71 yards and a touchdown. The Jets are now the only team in the NFL without a win. Even with Justin Fields having a pretty good season, this Jets team just has a bunch of holes on the roster, and they're facing one of the best defenses in the NFL. The Broncos are allowing the 5th least amount of yards per game this season, and they have an NFL leading 21 sacks, which is 5 more than second place, and this one will probably be a blowout. So I had the Broncos winning and covering the 7.5 point spread. Then the 1-4 Browns versus the 3-1 Steelers. The Browns are coming off a very close loss, 21-17 over the Vikings, and this game was in London. And the Browns had the lead for most of this game, but their defense just couldn't get a stop when they needed it. At the end of the 4th quarter, Carson Wentz hit Jordan Addison for a 12-yard touchdown with 25 seconds left to take a 21-17 lead, and the Browns had no more timeouts and just couldn't get down the field. But overall, Dillon Gabriel played pretty good in his first career start, going 19 of 33 with 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. Quinshon Judkins continues to have an amazing rookie season with 110 yards rushing, and David Njoku led them with 6 receptions, 67 yards and a touchdown. But the strength of this Browns team, their defense just didn't show up this week. Their offense did look a little better, but still not great. Then for the Steelers, they're coming off their bye week, and in week 4, they won 24-21 over the Vikings in Ireland. So they're going to be fully rested versus this Browns team, and they have to travel back from London. And the Browns historically struggle a lot in Pittsburgh, especially in the regular season, and they haven't won a regular season game in Pittsburgh since 2003, but they did win a playoff game in the 2020 season. But I have the Steelers winning and covering the 5.5 point spread. Then we have the 3-2 Chargers versus the 1-4 Dolphins. The Chargers are coming off a 27-10 loss versus the Commanders, and Justin Herbert went 22 of 29, 166 yards, a touchdown and an interception, and he led the team with 60 yards rushing, and Keenan Allen had 5 receptions for 58 yards. But they did lose Omarion Hampton for a while with an ankle injury, and he was placed on the IR, so they're now down their top 2 running backs, and Joe Alt is still questionable this week. Then for the Dolphins, they're coming off a 27-24 loss over the Panthers, and Tua actually had a really good game, going 27 of 36, 256 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But they couldn't run the ball at all in this game, having 14 carries for 19 yards as a team. But Jalen Waddle had a good game with 6 receptions, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Even with all the Chargers' injuries, I still think they're a better team, and I have them winning and covering the 3.5 point spread. Then the 3-2 Patriots versus the 1-4 Saints. The Patriots are coming off a 23-20 win over the Bills on Sunday Night Football, where Drake May went 22 of 30 and 273 yards. And Stephon Diggs had a massive game in his return to Buffalo with 10 receptions and 146 yards. But they did lose Antonio Gibson for the season with a torn ACL. Then the Saints got their first win of the season over the Giants, and Spencer Rattler went 21 of 31, 225 yards and a touchdown, and that was actually Spencer Rattler's first career win in his 11th start. And Rashid Shaheed had a good game with 4 receptions, 114 yards and a touchdown. Overall, the Saints have been playing decent this year. Yes, they only have 1 win, but they have been somewhat staying in games this year. But I think this is a much better Patriots team, so I have the Patriots winning and covering the 3.5 point spread. Then the 3-2 Rams versus the 1-4 Ravens. The Rams are coming off a 26-23 loss in overtime versus the 49ers. Matt Stafford went 30 of 47, 389 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and he leads the NFL with 1,500 passing yards and is second in passing touchdowns with 11. Then Kyren Williams had 65 yards rushing, but in the fourth quarter he did fumble inside the 5, which had a massive role in them losing. But then Devontae Adams had 5 receptions for 88 yards. Then the Ravens are coming off a blowout loss, 44-10 against the Texans, where Cooper Rush went 14 of 20, 179 yards, and 3 interceptions. Then Derrick Henry was held to just 33 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Zay Flowers had 5 receptions for 72 yards. And this week, the Ravens injury report is still full of starters, with Lamar Jackson, Ronnie Stanley, Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and Marlon Humphrey all questionable. So I have the Rams winning and covering the 7.5 point spread. Then the 2-3 Cardinals versus the 4-1 Colts. The Cardinals are coming off a crazy loss, 22-21 versus the Titans, where in the fourth quarter, when they're up 21-6, their running back DeMarcado broke off a 72-yard run, but in celebration he threw the ball out of the end zone before actually scoring. So it was a touchback and the Titans got the ball back and went down and scored. Then later in the fourth quarter, Cam Ward threw an interception, and that interception was then fumbled, and the ball was kicked twice, and Tyler Lockett landed on it in the end zone for a fumble recovery touchdown. Then after forcing a punt, the Titans went on an 11-play drive and kicked a walk-off field goal. But overall in the game, Kyler Murray went 23 of 31 with 220 yards, and Marvin Harrison had a good game with 4 receptions and 98 yards. But I feel like the Cardinals have been really underperforming this season, and now Kyler Murray is questionable this week. Then for the Colts, they're coming off a massive blowout win, 40-6 against the Raiders, and Daniel Jones went 20 of 29, 212 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Then Jonathan Taylor had another massive game with 66 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, and Ashton Dolan had 2 receptions for 55 yards. And on defense, they had 4 sacks and 2 interceptions, while also holding the Raiders just to 6 points. But they did lose their kicker, Spencer Schrader, for the season with a torn ACL and MCL. But I have the Colts winning and covering the 6.5 point spread. Then we have the 3-2 Seahawks versus the 4-1 Jaguars. The Seahawks are coming off a 38-35 loss against the Buccaneers, and both quarterbacks in this game played amazing, but Sam Darnold went 28 of 34, 341 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Kenneth Walker had 86 yards rushing, and Jackson Smith and Jigba had 8 receptions, 132 yards, and a touchdown. And he's second in the NFL in receiving yards at 534. Then the Jaguars are coming off a upset win, 31-28 over the Chiefs, where Trevor Lawrence went 18 of 25, 221 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. and led the team with 54 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. And Brian Thomas Jr. had 4 receptions for 80 yards. And Devin Lloyd had another interception, which was returned for a 99-yard pick six, and he's already up to 4 interceptions on the season. So this is going to be a great game. The Jaguars are off to a very surprising start, and I could actually see this game going either way, but I have the Seahawks winning. Then the 2-1 Cowboys versus the 2-3 Panthers. In the Cowboys win over the Jets, Dak Prescott went 18 of 29, 237 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Then Javonte Williams continues with his breakout season, having 135 yards and a touchdown, which puts him at 447 yards on the season, which is 3rd in the NFL, and puts him on pace for 1,500 yards on the season, while also having a total of 6 touchdowns on the season. Then Ryan Flournoy had 6 receptions for 114 yards. Then on defense, Dallas had 5 sacks. Then in the Panthers win over the Dolphins, Bryce Young went 19 of 30, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Rico Dowdle had a massive game with 206 yards and a touchdown, and Teteroa McMillan had 6 receptions for 73 yards. So far, this has been a weird season for the Panthers. It's been very up and down, but I really like how their offense has been, so I have them actually upsetting the Cowboys. Then the 1-4 Titans versus the 1-4 Raiders. In the Titans' first win this season against the Cardinals, Cam Ward went 21 of 39, 265 yards, and an interception. Then Tony Pollard had 67 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Calvin Ridley had 5 receptions and 131 yards. Then in the Raiders' loss against the Colts, Geno Smith went 25 of 36, 228 yards, and 2 interceptions, while also being sacked 4 times, and he leads the NFL with 9 interceptions already, and he just overall has been really bad. Ashton Jeanty then had 67 yards rushing at 4.8 yards per carry, and Trey Tucker had 4 receptions for 62 yards, but Brock Bowers is still questionable this week after missing the Colts game. Overall, I think this is going to be a very close game, and I have the Raiders winning, but I have the Titans covering the 4.5 point spread. Then for one of the biggest games of the week, the 4-1 49ers versus the 4-1 Buccaneers. In the 49ers win over the Rams, Mac Jones went 33 of 49, 342 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Then Christian McCaffrey had 57 yards rushing and 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. And Kendrick Bourne had a massive game with 10 receptions and 142 yards. And even with all the 49ers injuries, they played great with Mac Jones. And he'll probably start again this week, with Brock Purdy still dealing with his turf toe injury. Then for the Buccaneers, in their win over the Seahawks, it was another win by a walk-off, with Chase McLaughlin hitting a 39-yard walk-off field goal. And Baker had a great game, going 29 of 33, 379 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Then Rachaad White had 41 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Then Emeka Ibuka had 7 receptions, 163 yards, and a touchdown, which puts him at 445 yards, which is 4th in the NFL, and 5 touchdowns. But Bucky Irving is questionable again this week. This season, the Buccaneers have only won by walk-offs, and all 5 of their games have been within 1 possession, so it's going to be pretty close, and I could see this game going either way, but I have the Buccaneers winning and covering the 2.5 point spread. Then the 2-3 Bengals versus the 2-1 Packers. The Bengals are coming off a 37-24 loss against the Lions, where Jake Browning went 26 of 40, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, and he's up to 8 interceptions on the season. But Jamar Chase had a really good game with 6 receptions, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns, with one of those touchdowns being for 64 yards. Then the Packers are coming off their bye week, and in their last game they tied with the Cowboys 40-40. But the Packers have a huge advantage in this game, with them coming off their bye week and having a home game at Lambeau. But the Bengals just traded for Joe Flacco, and I think this is a really good situation for both sides, because Flacco is still great at throwing deep balls, and they have 2 great receivers with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so they could have a pretty fun offense to watch. But I still have the Packers winning, but I have the Bengals covering the 14.5 point spread. Then on Sunday Night Football, we have the 4-1 Lions versus the 2-3 Chiefs. In the Lions win over the Bengals, Jared Goff went 19 of 23, 258 yards and 3 touchdowns, but was sacked 4 times. Then David Montgomery had 65 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Amon-Ra St. Brown had 8 receptions and 100 yards. And on defense, they had 2 sacks and 3 interceptions. But this week with the Chiefs, they're going to be without 3 corners, including their top 2, with Terrion Arnold being out, Khalil Dorsey being out, and DJ Reed being put on the IR. Then in the Chiefs' loss against the Jaguars, Patrick Mahomes went 29 of 41, 318 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, while also leading the team with 60 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown. Then Tyquan Thornton had 3 receptions for 90 yards. Overall, the Chiefs have been struggling this season, but with the Lions' depleted secondary, they should be able to pass pretty well. It's just really tough when you lose your top 2 corners, so I have the Chiefs winning and covering the 2.5 point spread. Then moving over to Monday Night Football, we have another week with 2 games, the first one being the 4-1 Bills versus the 2-2 Falcons. And in the Bills' first loss of the season against the Patriots, Josh Allen went 22 of 31, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, while also leading the team with 53 yards rushing. And Dalton Kincaid had 6 receptions for 108 yards. Then the Falcons are coming off their bye week, and in their last game, they beat the Commanders 34-27. The Falcons have been really up and down the season, and the Bills are still one of the best teams in the NFL, so I have the Bills winning and covering the 3.5 point spread. Then for the final game of the week, the 2-2 Bears versus the 3-2 Commanders. The Bears are coming off their bye week, and in their last game, they beat the Raiders 25-24, and in the Commanders' win over the Chargers, Jaden Daniels went 15 of 26, 231 yards and a touchdown. Then Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, their 7th round rookie running back, had a massive game with 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also having 2 receptions for 39 yards. And Deebo Samuel led the way with 8 receptions, 96 yards and a touchdown. And they could be getting back Terry McLaurin this week. I think this is going to be a pretty close game. The Bears have won their last 2 and are coming off their bye week, but the Commanders are just very good with Jaden Daniels. So I have the Commanders winning, but I have the Bears covering the 4.5 point spread. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.